In 1963, a woman in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, woke up at 6:15 every single morning. Not because she wanted to, because there was a boy asleep down the hall who needed to leave the house in 45 minutes, and she had decided, somewhere along the way, that he was not going to walk into that school hungry. She did not own a car. She worked part-time at a fabric store. She counted pennies on the kitchen counter, like most people count seconds on a clock. But every morning, without fail, that lunch got made. One sandwich, one piece of fruit, something cold to drink, wrapped, packed, slid into a metal lunchbox, decorated with a cartoon cowboy that her son had already decided was too babyish, but refused to say so out loud because he knew she had paid for it. That woman never once called herself a chef. She never used the word nutrition. She did not follow a recipe. She followed her son. She knew what he liked. She knew what he would eat and what he would trade away and what he would leave untouched at the bottom of the box, slightly bruised and warm by noon. She adjusted. She adapted. She paid attention in the way that people pay attention when love is the only currency they have left. And what she packed, day after day, year after year, was not just food. It was a language, a quiet, edible way of saying, I thought about you this morning before you were even awake. I thought about you before I thought about myself. We have forgotten that language. Not completely, not all of us, but enough. Enough that an entire generation of meals, of combinations, of little rituals wrapped in wax paper and tucked beside a thermos has quietly disappeared. Not from cookbooks, not from history, just from our hands, just from our kitchens, just from our children's lunchboxes, which are not even metal anymore, which do not carry the same weight, which do not make that same sound when they close. This is about 25 of those meals. The ones that lived inside the lunchboxes of American schoolchildren through the 1960s, before the cafeterias took over, before the vending machines arrived, before someone decided that a child's midday meal was a market opportunity, before all of that, when lunch was still personal, when lunch was still made by someone who knew your name. Number 25. The cream cheese and olive sandwich. It sounds strange now. It sounded strange then too, if you were the kid eating it next to someone with peanut butter and jelly. But cream cheese spread thick on soft white bread, dotted with sliced green olives, wrapped tight in wax paper so the bread stayed soft, was a staple in northeastern kitchens across the late 50s and into the 60s. It was salty. It was rich. It was filling in a way that felt almost luxurious for something that cost almost nothing. A block of cream cheese in 1965 cost about 19 cents. A small jar of olives lasted a week. The whole sandwich came in at under 8 cents, and it kept a child full until 3 in the afternoon. The kids who ate this usually sat near the windows, not because they were outcasts, because they had learned that the smell traveled, and they had also learned that once someone tasted it, they wanted one too, and trading meant going without. Number 24. Deviled ham on rye. There was a canned product, a little metal tin with a devil on the label, that mothers across middle America spread on rye bread with mustard, and sometimes a thin slice of dill pickle. The ham was already seasoned, already soft, ready to spread in under 2 minutes. A mother with 3 kids to get out the door by 7:30 did not have time for elaborate preparation. She had time for a tin, a knife, and a decision. Rye bread held up better than white in the heat of a lunchbox. It did not get soggy. By noon, when the pickle had softened slightly against the ham and the mustard had mellowed into the bread, it tasted like something that had been made deliberately, carefully, with forethought, which of course it had. The tins cost 11 cents. One tin made 2 sandwiches. One child, one lunch, 5.5 cents. And yet the boy who ate that sandwich grew up remembering it as one of the best things he ever ate. Number 23. Pimento cheese. Southern mothers knew this recipe the way they knew their children's shoe sizes. They made it in batches. They stored it in ceramic bowls in the refrigerator, covered with a cloth, and they scooped it onto white bread with a fork in the mornings before the house was fully awake. Sharp cheddar, grated by hand. jarred pimentos, drained, mayonnaise, sometimes a pinch of cayenne, sometimes not. It was creamy and sharp and slightly sweet from the pimentos, and it spread like something that had been thought about. Children brought this to school in Mississippi and Georgia and Tennessee and Alabama, and the kids who did not know what it was usually wanted some. The kids who did know what it was understood that it was a family recipe, that it came from someone's grandmother, that it was not available in any store, that it could not be traded for because there was simply nothing comparable to trade it for. Number 22, pickled beet and egg sandwich. And yes, this is the one. This is the sandwich that a teacher in a small school outside of Eau Claire, Wisconsin called a mother to ask about. Not in concern, exactly, more in curiosity, because the boy had arrived at lunch, opened his box, and pulled out a sandwich that was unmistakably, brilliantly, unnervingly purple. His mother had grown up in Pennsylvania Dutch country. She pickled beets every fall, rows of jars lined up on wooden shelves in the basement, the color of dark rubies. She hard-boiled eggs and submerged them in the beet liquid for 3 days. Then she sliced them, layered them on white bread with a thin smear of cream cheese, and called it lunch. The bread turned purple at the edges. The egg was pink through and through. The taste was tangy, sweet, earthy, and unlike anything a cafeteria could have produced. The teacher called to check in. The mother explained. The teacher asked for the recipe. The boy never once felt embarrassed. He had known from the moment he opened that lunchbox and saw what was inside that his mother had made something for him that nobody else had. He had never been happier. Number 21, tuna salad with sweet pickle relish. Not tuna with celery and mayonnaise only, the way most people make it now. Tuna with sweet pickle relish mixed in, which changed everything. The relish added a soft sweetness that cut through the fishiness in a way that made children eat it without complaint. A can of tuna in 1964 cost 17 cents. A jar of relish lasted a month. Mixed with mayonnaise, spread on white bread, sometimes with a leaf of iceberg lettuce that went soft by noon, this was a complete protein lunch for under 12 cents. Mothers with limited grocery budgets learned to depend on this combination, not because it was special, because it worked, because children ate it, because the alternative, a child sitting in a cafeteria with nothing to eat, was not a thought they could entertain. Number 20, the bologna and butter sandwich. No mustard, no cheese, no lettuce, just bologna and butter on white bread. And if you grew up in the Midwest, you already know exactly what this tastes like. The butter kept the bread from getting dry. The bologna, sliced thick at the deli counter or pulled from the pre-packaged variety in the refrigerator case, was mild and faintly smoky and just salty enough. Children ate 3 of these without thinking about it. Mothers made them without measuring anything. This was a lunch that required 4 ingredients, 2 minutes, and the assumption that simple things done well are enough. The children who had these sandwiches did not feel deprived. They felt fed. There is a difference. Number 19, the leftovers wrapped in foil. This was not a specific dish. This was a philosophy. Monday's pot roast became Tuesday's sliced beef sandwich. Sunday's baked chicken became Monday's cold chicken leg in a piece of foil, still faintly crispy on the outside, still seasoned, and better cold than most things are hot. Wednesday's meatloaf became Thursday's meatloaf sandwich, which was an entirely different and possibly superior thing. Mothers who cooked dinner every evening did not waste. Wasting was not an option that existed in most households in 1962. What was made was eaten, and what remained was rethought, rewrapped, and sent to school the next morning inside a metal box that kept it coolish until noon. The children who brought leftover meatloaf sandwiches did not trade them. They ate in silence, aware that they were eating something better than what surrounded them, even if they could not fully articulate why. There is something worth saying here, before we continue. Something that does not fit neatly inside any one item on this list. The women who made these lunches, and they were overwhelmingly women, did not write any of this down. They did not photograph it. They did not share it on any platform. They did not receive credit for any of it, not publicly, not loudly. They woke up before anyone else was awake. They stood in kitchens that were too small and too hot in summer and too cold in winter. They worked with what was in the refrigerator, not with what they wished was in the refrigerator. They thought about a specific child, a specific hunger, a specific preference, a specific school day that had not yet happened, and they made a decision. Some of them wrote notes on napkins, small pieces of paper folded into quarters and tucked beside the thermos. Have a good day. I love you. Do not trade your apple. You always feel better after you eat. These notes were not literature. They were not meant to last. They dissolved in the washing of lunchboxes. They were lost with the discarded wax paper. But the children who received them remember. Decades later, in their 50s and their 60s, they remember. Not the words exactly, the feeling. The specific physical feeling of opening a lunchbox and finding a piece of their mother folded up inside. That feeling has a name, though most of us have never called it anything. It is the feeling of being known, not perfectly, not without mistakes, but known. Enough that someone thought about you before you thought about yourself. Enough that someone packed your lunch. Number 18, the egg salad sandwich. Hard-boiled eggs, mashed with a fork, mixed with mayonnaise, salt, pepper, and sometimes a touch of yellow mustard. This was prepared the night before in many households, refrigerated overnight, and spread cold on bread in the morning. It was mild. It was filling. It was one of the cheapest protein-dense lunches a mother could make, coming in at roughly 9 cents per sandwich in 1965. The children who ate this either loved it or tolerated it, and the ones who tolerated it usually became the ones who loved it in adulthood, when they made it for the first time for themselves and discovered it tasted like something they had been missing without knowing what it was called. Number 17, the chicken salad sandwich on white bread. In 1962, a mother in Akron, Ohio, packed the same lunch for her son every school day. For 9 years. Not because she was lazy, not because she lacked imagination, because he ate it. Every single time, completely, down to the last bite. Every crumb, with obvious and uncomplicated satisfaction. She paid attention. She understood that consistency, when a child is anxious or uncertain or simply hungry, is its own form of love. The sandwich was chicken salad, leftover roast chicken, pulled by hand into small pieces, celery chopped fine, mayonnaise just enough, salt, sometimes a little onion powder, spread on soft white bread and cut diagonally, which she had read somewhere made food look more appetizing and which she never questioned, wrapped in wax paper and twisted at the ends. Her son became a cardiologist. He is now in his early 70s. He still makes this sandwich on Saturday mornings. He says it does not taste like chicken salad. He says it tastes like being loved by someone who could not afford to say it out loud. There are no other words needed for that. Number 16, the peanut butter and honey sandwich. Not jelly, honey. Poured from a glass jar that had a little dipper inside. Honey that crystallized in winter and had to be warmed by holding the jar under warm water for a minute. The honey soaked slightly into the bread in a way that jelly never did. It made the bread heavier. It made the peanut butter cling differently. It tasted warmer somehow than anything that had come from refrigeration. Children who had honey instead of jelly usually thought it was normal. Adults who remember it now understand it was a choice. Number 15, the sardine sandwich. This one requires context because sardines have acquired a reputation since the 1960s that they did not entirely deserve and certainly did not have then. Canned sardines in oil or mustard sauce were a working-class protein staple throughout the post-war years. They were shelf-stable, inexpensive, and packed with nutrients that nobody called omega-3 fatty acids yet, but that made a significant difference in the way children felt and thought in the afternoon hours. A tin of sardines cost 14 cents. Mashed onto bread with a little mustard or cream cheese, they were a complete and serious lunch. The children who ate this did not necessarily love it. Some of them sat near the windows, which was not a coincidence. But the mothers who packed this knew that their child needed something real inside them. and sardines were real in a way that was hard to argue with. Number 14. Cold baked beans in a thermos. Not the style of beans from a can, poured cold, which would be grim. Baked beans that had been made at home, slow cooked with salt pork and molasses and a touch of mustard. The kind that took hours and filled the house with a smell that meant Sunday was happening. Those beans, stored overnight, reheated slightly in the morning, poured into a wide-mouthed thermos that kept them warm until noon, eaten with a spoon, sometimes alongside crackers, sometimes just the beans, alone, the whole thermos. Children who brought this were usually children whose families made everything from scratch, who had backyards with gardens, who canned things in summer, who understood, without being taught, that food made slowly was food worth waiting for. Number 13. The wax paper packet of crackers with peanut butter. Not a sandwich. A packet. Crackers pulled from a box, spread with peanut butter using a butter knife, assembled like a stack of small tiles, and wrapped in wax paper, and tied with a piece of string or sealed with a folded edge. This was supplementary usually. Crackers plus a hard-boiled egg. Crackers plus a slice of cheese. Crackers plus whatever the refrigerator offered that morning when the sandwich fixings had run thin. The children who received crackers instead of a sandwich did not always feel shortchanged. Sometimes they felt like they had received something more interesting, something that required more attention to eat, something that did not fall apart when you dropped it. Here is where this story gets harder to tell. In the years between 1967 and 1975, a systematic shift occurred in American schools that most parents did not notice until it was already complete. Food service companies, some of them subsidiaries of corporations that had grown large on government contracts during the war years, began approaching school districts with offers. They would handle the lunch program, they would build the kitchens, they would supply the food, they would manage the labor. The school would pay a contracted rate per meal, and the food service company would absorb the complexity and the cost of doing it at scale. It sounded efficient. In some ways it was. Schools that could not afford full kitchen staff suddenly had cafeterias. Children who would otherwise have had nothing had access to a hot lunch. These are not small things, but the meals changed. The ingredients were standardized. The sourcing was centralized. The food that arrived in school loading docks was not the same as the food that a mother in Akron or Cedar Rapids or Eau Claire had selected at a store and brought home and made decisions about. It was food that had been designed to survive a supply chain. It was food engineered for compliance, not for taste, not for love, not for a specific child with a specific preference and a specific hunger. And quietly, generation by generation, the lunchboxes started disappearing. Not all at once, not dramatically, just slowly, the way light changes in the afternoon, the way you only notice it has gotten dark once it already has. Number 12. Cold macaroni salad in a glass container. Elbow macaroni, cooked soft, drained, cooled, mixed with mayonnaise and diced celery, and a hard-boiled egg, and sometimes a little bit of diced ham, and always, always, a dusting of paprika on top that turns slightly orange against the white of the mayonnaise. Packed in a glass container with a metal lid, wrapped in a dish towel to keep it cold, and to prevent the lid from rattling during the bus ride. This was a lunch that required planning. You had to make the macaroni the night before. You had to chill it long enough. You had to pack the container carefully. It was not a last-minute lunch. It was a thought-out lunch, a prepared lunch. The kind of lunch that meant someone had thought about Tuesday before Tuesday arrived. Number 11. The thermos of tomato soup. Campbell's tomato soup made with milk instead of water, which made it creamier and richer and just barely sweet in a way that felt like an afternoon comfort applied to noon. Poured hot into a steel thermos in the morning, still warm enough at lunch to steam slightly when opened. Eaten with a small spoon that was often kept in the lunchbox permanently, a battered little spoon that had made the same trip hundreds of times. Children who had soup in their thermos often shared, not because they were told to, because soup, warm and red and slightly thick, in the middle of a November school day, is the kind of thing that creates a momentary community around a table of 8-year-olds who would not otherwise have anything to share. Number 10. The jelly roll sandwich. This was not a dessert roll. It was a piece of soft white bread, spread with butter, and then with grape jelly, rolled up lengthwise into a cylinder, wrapped in wax paper, and tucked into the box. It was a lunch for the mornings when the bread had gone slightly stale and would not hold up as a sandwich, when the jelly was almost gone and there was only enough for a thin layer, when time had run out and the bus was 4 minutes away. Mothers improvised. This is what improvisation looks like when you love someone and the clock is against you. A rolled piece of bread with jelly inside. It sounds like nothing. It tasted, to the child eating it, like effort. Like the specific effort of someone who tried. Number 9. The cheese and pickle sandwich. Sharp cheddar, sliced at home with a knife, because pre-sliced cheese in individual wrappers had not yet fully colonized the refrigerator section of American grocery stores. Laid on white bread with a dill pickle slice. Sometimes bread and butter pickles which were sweeter. Always something that added a sour note against the fat of the cheese. This sandwich improved as the morning went on. By noon, the pickle had softened the bread around it. The cheese had lost its refrigerator chill. The whole thing had come to room temperature in a way that made it taste more like itself. Number 8. The peanut butter and banana sandwich. In 1965, this lunch cost less than 6 cents to make. 2 slices of bread at roughly 1 cent each, a tablespoon of peanut butter at under 2 cents, half a banana at approximately 2 cents. Total protein content was higher than any prepared item sold through a school cafeteria food service program at the time. Any nutritional analysis performed on commercially prepared school lunches during the same period reveals lower protein density, higher sodium content, and significantly more processed filler ingredients. Mothers who packed this were not thinking in those terms. They were thinking in the terms of, he is hungry and this is what we have, and peanut butter and banana is something he will actually eat. They were right. The children ate it. They grew. They came home ready to do it again tomorrow. Number 7. The cold fried chicken leg. This required that someone had fried chicken the night before, which meant flour and oil and a hot cast iron pan and 45 minutes of attention and a kitchen that smelled of something real. The leftover leg, still slightly crispy on the outside, wrapped in foil or wax paper, tucked into the bottom of the lunchbox, was not a compromise. It was a prize. Children who had cold fried chicken for lunch were the envy of every table they sat at. Not because chicken was expensive, because it was obvious, in the way that cold fried chicken is obvious, that someone had cooked a whole meal the night before and had thought to save a piece for the morning. Number 6. The deviled egg in a small container. Hard-boiled eggs, halved, the yolks removed and mixed with mayonnaise and a touch of yellow mustard and a pinch of paprika and sometimes a very small amount of sweet relish, then spooned carefully back into the white halves and nestled in a small container with a lid, tucked into the lunchbox in a way that required actual spatial reasoning to keep them level. These were not everyday lunches. These were lunches for special occasions, for birthdays, for the last day before a holiday break, for mornings when a mother wanted to make something that communicated more than just sustenance. These were lunches that said, I made something delicate for you. I thought about the presentation. I thought about the way it would look when you opened the box. You are worth the extra 8 minutes. Number 5. The saltine crackers and canned sardines. Again, sardines. Because they deserve a second mention. Because in coastal towns, in fishing communities, in households where fish was the affordable protein, and the children knew it and accepted it without drama, this was a real and satisfying lunch. Saltines for crunch, sardines for substance. A small wedge of lemon if the family had one, or a dash of vinegar from the bottle that lived near the stove, eaten efficiently, methodically, without ceremony. The children from these households became adults who still eat sardines on crackers when they are alone and do not feel the need to explain it to anyone. They eat it standing at the counter. They do not photograph it. It is not for anyone else. It is just lunch. It is just theirs. Number 4. The lunchbox with nothing inside. This is the entry that has no recipe. This is the one that requires you to sit with something uncomfortable for a moment. There were children in every school, in every decade, in every district, who came to lunch and opened their lunchbox and found it empty, or nearly empty. A single cracker, a heel of bread. Nothing wrapped in wax paper because there was no wax paper. Nothing in a thermos because there was no thermos. These children had learned to say they forgot their lunch. They had learned to say they were not hungry. They had learned to look out the window during the lunch period, or to ask to go to the bathroom and wait in there until the bell rang, because it was easier than sitting at a table with nothing while everyone around you had something. The teachers often knew. They watched. They noticed the children who never opened their boxes, or who opened them and looked inside and then closed them again quickly. Some of those teachers kept crackers in their desk drawers. Some of them ate slowly at their own desk during lunch, eating just a little at a time in case a child needed a reason to come forward. Some of them went home and cried in their kitchens in the evenings, thinking about specific faces, thinking about what they could have done differently. The mothers of those children were not absent. They were not indifferent. Some of them went without breakfast so that there was something, anything to put in the box. Some of them made watered-down oatmeal in the evenings and sent it to school in a jar, cold by morning, and the child ate it because it was what there was. Some of them stood at the kitchen counter in the early morning dark and took inventory of a refrigerator that was nearly empty and made calculations that no parent should ever have to make. This is not nostalgia. This happened. It happened alongside every warmly packed lunch on this list. Both things were true at the same time, in the same schools, sometimes at the same table. We remember the good ones because we need to, but we should not forget the empty ones, because they are part of the same story. Number 3, the pineapple cream cheese sandwich. Sweet cream cheese mixed with crushed pineapple that had been drained and patted dry, spread on soft white bread. This was a combination that appeared across 1950s church cookbooks and women's magazine recipe columns, and then migrated naturally into lunchboxes. It was sweet without being dessert. It was creamy without being heavy. It was slightly tropical in a decade when tropical anything felt slightly exotic and aspirational. Children who had this were usually children whose mothers subscribed to Good Housekeeping or Better Homes and Gardens, and who clipped recipes and tried them on weekday mornings and refined them over time. These were children whose mothers thought of the lunch hour as a small creative project, which is a generous and optimistic way to think about something that happens every day, whether you have the energy for it or not. Number 2, the ham and apple butter sandwich. Thin sliced ham, the deli kind with a slight pink color and a mild smokiness, paired with apple butter, which is different from applesauce in the way that concentration is different from dilution. Apple butter is cooked down slowly, for hours, until the apples become almost caramelized, dark and sweet and deeply flavored, more intense than anything fresh. Spread on one side of white bread, the ham on the other, pressed together. The sweet of the apple butter against the salt of the ham was a combination that worked the way old combinations work, because someone figured it out long ago and it became the way it was done. This sandwich was common in Appalachian households, in Pennsylvania, in Virginia and West Virginia and Ohio, in kitchens where apple butter was made in fall and stored in jars and considered a pantry staple rather than a specialty item. The children who grew up eating this sandwich associate apple butter, still, with the smell of a lunchroom in October, with the sound of metal lunchboxes opening, with the specific pleasure of something that was recognizably theirs. Number 1, the thermos of warm milk and the butter sandwich. The simplest thing on this list, the oldest thing on this list. A thermos of warm whole milk, sealed in the morning while the milk was still steaming, still slightly rich with fat, and a piece of white bread spread with real butter, salted, folded once. That is the entire lunch. This was packed in metal lunchboxes for 3 generations. Grandmothers packed it. Their daughters packed it. Their daughters, the last ones, packed it in the early years of the 1960s, before the options changed and the lunchrooms filled up with new things. The milk stayed warm until noon. The bread was soft. The butter had softened into it and become part of it. The whole lunch took 5 minutes to eat and left a child feeling quiet and full and cared for in a way that is very hard to describe to someone who has never experienced it. When plastic lunchboxes replaced metal ones, when thermos culture faded, when cafeterias became the center of the school lunch experience, this meal disappeared. Nobody wrote an obituary for it. Nobody noticed it was gone until decades later, when grown adults tried to describe it to their own children and found they did not have the words. They only had the feeling of opening a box that someone had packed for them, the feeling of finding something warm inside, the feeling of knowing that somewhere in a kitchen that smelled like morning, someone had stood at a counter and thought about them, had wrapped something for them, had closed a latch and sent them out into the world with the knowledge, even if they never named it, that they were not alone. That is what a packed lunch is, at its root. It is proof of someone's attention. It is evidence that you cross someone's mind before you cross the threshold. It is love that has been made practical, love that has been made edible, love that waits for you at noon inside a box. Tomorrow morning, do something. Pack a lunch, not for your desk, not to eat standing over the sink. Pack a real lunch in a bag, wrapped in something, and sit down at noon and eat it with both hands and nothing to look at except the wall or the window or whatever is outside. And while you sit there, think about who used to do this for you. Think about the mornings they woke up early for it. Think about the mornings they were tired and did it anyway. Think about the mornings they were out of ideas and improvised something from whatever was left. Think about all the lunches you ate without knowing what went into making them, without knowing what they cost, without knowing that each one was a small decision made on your behalf by someone who loved you in the most practical, quiet, unglamorous way that love can be expressed. You were worth getting up for. Every single morning, you were worth getting up for. Some of us are only just now learning to understand what that means.